In this episode, I want to talk about two runestones that are somewhat special, very interesting runestones, and not exactly what you would expect to find. This first one is called DKSJY37, very interesting name. This means it's a Danish runestone. DK stands for Denmark. So, we have two runestones from Denmark this time. And the text, I will come to the text. You see, this stone is a little special because you can see why it's special. It has the runes, of course, and it has hammers and holes. And we will get to that. The reading order might be interesting if you don't know how to read runes, and this is the reading order. So you start down here, read up there, and go down there. And the text is Rafnukatuva Hiaurunardasiaft Thurui Trutniksina. And this of course means Rafnungetuva carved these runes, or runes these, after Thurvi, queen there, his or her. The Sina can mean all of these things. So, but because it's this Tuva that carved these runes, and Tuva is a female name, it's probably her queen. This is a very special name, not a name you hear very often. And as you can see, with the RH, but is misspelled with the HR, I mean. Like in Rafni, means raven. So that's supposed to be the H before the R. So there's a little misspelling there. Rafnuka isn't a name, first of all. Tuva is a name. Rafnuka is not a name. The word Rafnuka is actually two words. And we will get to that a bit later. But it means kind of very easily translated raven child, or daughter of Rafne, a name or an animal, of course. And then we have the other name is Thurvi, that's Torvi, means it has the Thur is the Tor, and the V ending, you know what V is, that is a holy, sacred place. But in a name like this, it means more like devoted or devotee. So before we go on with that, let's go. There's one very interesting thing with the runes here. So you see, most of these runes are from the younger Futhark, except one, which is this one. In this row, the first row, all of the A runes are from the older Futhark. Except when we come to the second row, there's a younger Futhark A. And these two runes never existed in the same row. So that becomes interesting, because it could potentially give us a date for the stone. Or approximate date. The younger Futhark came into existence somewhere in the 8th century, around the 700s. Basically at the same time as the older Futhark went out of use. So when we have a stone like this, with runes from both the older Futhark and the younger Futhark, I think we could place this stone somewhere in the early, or at least the first half of the 8th century or 9th century. So early 800s would be my guess. That's not a very certain way to date something, of course, but it is very uncommon to see one letter from 2 futharks mixed in the same text. It could also say something about who carved these runes, where they learned the runes, from who, maybe from someone older who knew the old one and had learned to make the new ones. And the thing with the older runes and the younger runes, most of, not all of them, but a portion, a pretty big portion of the stones carved with the older runes have some kind of magic on them, some kind of hidden message or something. Not all of them, of course, not all of them, but a big portion of them do. And the younger runes, when they came, they basically mostly are used as regular letters for writing. So the absolute biggest portion of runestones are with the younger runes. And you know what they say. They are basically epitaphs of this guy raised this stone after that guy, and he died there. And not much more. There are of course longer text than that, but that's what the younger runes on the stones basically say. The older stones speak of other things. Most of the spells, the magic spells, are written with the older runes. So I don't think there are that many spell stones with the younger runes. So that's interesting. The younger A and the older A. And I think it's interesting that all of these A's are the older ones. And the only younger A is in the end. I can't help to think that could mean something, but I have no idea what. I haven't found anything that could propose any such action. But where were we? Yeah, so this Rafnukatufa. So we see Rafnuka. That's a T. It's a little weak line there missing. Tufa. Spelled in one word. So Rafnukatufa is basically Rafnunge Tuva, meaning that this is a nickname. This is a name and this is a nickname. And as I said, means basically Raven Child raised the stone or carved the stone after Thorvi, her queen. And that's interesting, because if we had a queen, we should also have a king somewhere. But as far as I know, there is no known queen known as Thorvi. And I haven't found any stones close to this stone that speaks of a king, or both the king and the queen. So that's interesting. Let's see, what do we have more? Oh yeah, the holes, all these green circles here are actually holes in the stone, carved holes. I don't think any of them goes through the stone completely, maybe some of them do, but... And this is something you see on stones that either contains some kind of magic message, or on stones after someone who was a holy person of some sort, or a magic person or a holy person. And the old beliefs said that if you raise the stone over some, what we would call a witch, or some kind of magic person, someone with the connection to the gods, or someone who knew magic maybe, if you took a piece out of that stone or damaged that stone, that would make you magic. We have lots of stones talking about that, and you know, one of the most common spells on runestones is that if someone damages or destroys the stone, they will be smitten by ergi, which someone or some people think means that they will become sorcerers. And if you also note the two hammers, this is very unusual for old runestones. Most of the hammers we see on runestones are placed instead of the Christian cross, because most of the younger runestones have crosses on them. And sometimes we find runestones with a hammer instead of a cross, and that's not very common. Not very common to find hammers on stones at all, actually. But we have here two hammers of Thor, and we have this tuva, which the first base of tuva, the tu, is short for Thor, and we also have the thurvi, or the first part of Thorvi is Thor, and we have two Thor's hammers. Isn't that special? We are probably dealing with someone who had connections with the god Thor. That was a queen, but I don't think it was a royal queen, and we will talk more about that in just a minute. This stone is very, very special, and amazingly enough, I can't find that much information on it. But maybe we'll come back to this. Then we have another stone, DKSJY26, that stands a bit away, further away from the first stone. And this looks more like a regular stone, doesn't it? More like the lines up and down, but it's written in the old way of making a stone. It's not written in the classic, you know, the arc, like the upside down U. It's more written in lines, straight lines, and that's more the old way. And if we also look at the reading direction of this, it goes from the bottom and follows a line that way. That's also an old way of carving a stone. And if we take a look at the runes on the stone, as I said before, we had the old A and the new A. On this stone there's one, or is that an F? No, that's an A. We have only the younger A, and one old A. So the old A is still there. And the text says Rafnukatuvi auk futen auk knubli, þær þrír kadu þurviar hauk. Rafnukatuvi and Fundin and Knubli, these three made Thurvi's mound. So here we have the mound over Thurvi, which Rafnukatuvi and Fundin and Knubli raised. It's a very small mound, I can add. I don't have any pictures of it, but it's a very small mound. And it stands now on I don't know if it's in the churchyard or if it's outside, but I think it's inside the churchyard. But this stone is so much older than that church. There were no churches built in Denmark at this time that I'm aware of. If we're talking about the early 800s or the late 700s. So Rafnuka, there are 3 dots here. Tuvi. That probably means that these words are connected. So you see only 2 dots between as separators. Auk Futin, the end missing there. Auk Knubli. Dair, Thriar, Kadu, Thurvir, no, Thurviar, Hauk. And of course this grey part means that that piece of the stone is missing. So we have 2 more people now. We have the Rafnukatuvi and we have Fundin and Knubli. And of course this Knubli is probably not a K. Initially it's supposed to be a G, but in the younger Food Arc there are no G's. We can note, or I misspelled that, it's supposed to be the other way around, Tuva to Tuvi, because here it's Tuvi and on the other stone it was Tuva. That doesn't really mean anything. I will come to that. There are no real names, only nicknames. Yes, because Rafnukatuvi or Tuva. Tuva is a name, but Rafnukatuva is a nickname. Fundin is also a nickname, that's not a name. And Knubli is not a name, that's also a nickname. Thurvi is the only name here, if that was her name. It could be what she was called, but it's probably a name. Fundin in rune spelling. Fundin means the found one, something found. And that's interesting. So you see that that's not a name. You don't name someone the found one. And Knubli from Gnupr. That's a diminutive from the mountain or steep mountain, like a mountain. So Knubli as a nickname could be the rock or the boulder. Probably could mean someone big, built like a rock, or strong maybe. And Fundin is very interesting because that could also mean someone that has been found. And how do you find someone? Well, in the Viking Age and the Iron Age, and probably even earlier, unwanted children were sometimes put out in the forest. If they were disfigured in some way, or they didn't want them or couldn't provide for them, or maybe they thought it was a troll's child, which also was a thing, they could put them out in the forest, and maybe someone found such a child and took care of it. It could also mean some child that was left behind after the family died for some reason, by sickness maybe, or a raid or something, and there was a child left, because not always, if someone wanted to kill someone or a family, they didn't always kill the children. But the main thing is that this Fundin didn't get a name. It was called in this group of people the found one, the foundling. And Knubli, or Gnubli, that's not a name either. That's a nickname that he, or probably he, I don't actually know if it's a he or she, but I'm guessing it's a he. He had that nickname instead of a name. So we have the Raven Child, we have the Found One, and the Rock. Basically, that's my translation. Who raised the mound over Thurvi, their queen. And all of this is very interesting, because there is rarely runestones where they did not put in their names. And if you have looked at a couple of runestones, you know that they were particular with putting in their name. That was important. So this person made or had this stone made for this person. So you have two names there. And this person wrote the runes or carved the runes, so that's important to tell who carved the runes. And this person raised the stone. So you see you have all of these names mentioned because it's important to mention names. And on this stone, suddenly we don't have any names except Thorvi and the 3 nicknames. Why is that? I believe that this group of people was some kind of a constructed family. Not a blood-related family, but this Thorvi was probably someone who took care of all of these children, and they together became like a sect or like a little cult. And the explanation for that is that it's a bad word to use, but if you think of a shaman, someone with magic connections who can call upon the gods and interact with nature's beings and deities, they mostly lived outside of the cities because the people in the towns, there were no cities as such back then, but towns, they didn't want these people living among them, so they usually lived outside of the village. And if this Thorvi was one of these persons, the magic persons, like a vulva or something like that, and found all of these children for some reason, left behinds or leftovers or whatever, put out one of these forest children, maybe she taught them in the mysteries of the magic. That's not improbable. And this would make them a family by themselves that didn't really need names. And that is a very complicated discussion that I can't put into this short episode. But it's a thing. So the name Rafnuka, if we go a little more into the translation of the names, Raft means raven, and we have the misspelling there, and Uka, this is a problem with the younger Futhark, that there are only 16 letters. The older Futhark had all the letters, so it's pretty easy to read, but the younger ones you have to guess sometimes. And one word that is closest to this Uka would be unge, which means child or kid. So that's a word still used today, at least in Swedish. Unge can also mean the young, as a nickname, as in Ramon Hinungi, or this and that, the young, like in Junior. But the most probable translation of this would be raven child. And it can also mean, in other translations, a child of Rafn, which is a man's name. So child of this Rafn man, Rafn's son or daughter. The female would be Refna or Repna, so Rafn would be male. The child of Rafn, the raven child, or the descendant of the raven, the bird or the man, could have a spiritual meaning, depending on how it was supposed to be read or interpreted. And we don't know that, so this is just a guessing game. So it could be that Tova Ravenchild could be another way to say Rafnadottir, because the Norse peoples, all Scandinavian peoples, have used the patronymic, like the son and daughter surnames, for a very long time, and still do. So we don't know actually what this means, but these are the three possibilities that I can think of. So Tuva, the child of the father Rafn, would be Rafnadottir. Maybe, could be that. It could also be descendant of the raven, the bird, and the raven symbolizes Odin, of course. Could be some interpretation into that, a spiritual thing. And number 2 here is basically the same as number 1 and 3, just said in another way. And the Uka, Unge, could be Rafn the Young, or Rafn Junior. That would mean Tuva Rafn the Junior, so that's not really probable. But Ungi or Inungi as a nickname would mean the young, the younger or junior. I don't think that's the way we should read this though, because I think the Raven Child or Rafnadottir would be the more probable way to interpret this. So we have Tova Ravenchild, the foundling and little mountain, or the rock raised the mound over Thorvi. And I'm just gonna read this. As the name says, she was somewhat devoted to the god Thor. Either devoted sacrificer or priestess, or a keeper of a sacred place devoted to Thor, or simply someone named Thorvi, because Thorvi is a name. Thorvi can also, it can have both of these meanings. She could be a devotee to Thor, or a priestess to Thor, or the keeper of a sacred place devoted to the god Thor. It could be any of these things. And this is what I talked about before. This person seems to have taken care of these nameless children as the found one, a raven child in Little Mountain. Maybe this Thorvi didn't have children of her own. And this is also a thing. If she was one of these, like a vulva or a magic person, sorceress, or something like that, they very rarely had their own children. Because who would want to impregnate one of these? They didn't even dare touch them or speak to them, if not asked to speak to them in most cases. So impregnating one of them would be out of the question, totally. And that speaks to the theory that she took care of these nameless children. Or if they had names, who knows? Maybe she found them when they were so young that she didn't use names. And names in the Norse culture is a separate topic. So you shouldn't think about names back then as we think about names today, because that's not even close to the same thing. But that's another topic. This could have been a small clan or a family made of lost souls, or even youngsters gathered together in the name of Thor. That could also be a thing. This Thorvi could be maybe all of these, the Tuva, the Knubli and Fundin and the Thorvi were 4 lost children for some reason. Maybe lost their parents in a fight or battle, or a fire or disease, and they decided to move on together. And this Thorvi had the ability to speak to or call on the gods, maybe. So she was made the queen, or the leader, maybe. That's also a theory. That's a plausible theory. We have no idea. It's, as I said, this is all guesswork. All we know is that there were 4 of them, and one of them died. And some time after that, the others also died, probably. But in this case, we know that one of them died, and the other 3 made 2 runestones and 1 mound after her. One stone says that Thorvi was a queen, so was probably the leader or the eldest of the gathering. And this is also interesting if she was one of these magic people, or a vulva. Did they call the spiritual or religious leaders queens? Maybe they did. I know that the Norse pagan community all over the world basically has decided to make the religious or spiritual leaders Gothi. But Gothi basically means landowner and has nothing to do with spiritual leadership or religious leadership. The Gothi was the one who claimed the land. So the one that claimed a piece of land controlled that piece of land. And that person was the one leading the rituals on that land, or that person choose who was supposed to lead the rituals on that land. But the Gothi doesn't mean the priest. Gothi basically means landowner, the owner of the land, or the head of the land, land claimer. So Gothi does not mean priest, as far too many Norse pagan crowds seem to think. They go around and say, I'm the Gothi and I'm the priest. So yeah, sure, you're not a... You claim the land, maybe. You're not a priest. Owning land doesn't make you a religious leader. So that's not really correct. We can talk about that more if someone wants to hear about it. But in this case, when we have that runestone and we see these hammers and we see all the holes, all of this speaks for this Thorvi, even the name Thorvi. This is a cult of Thor. This is a religious gathering around a holy person connected to the god Thor. And especially the hammers. If the hammers does not point to the Tuva, which is basically the same name as Thorvi, as the first TU is Thor, and this is the last ending of the name, as well as Thorvi, so Thor and Vi, and two names, two hammers. It could indicate that. But there's a lot of Thor indications all over this place. And the holes suggests that this person was holy, very holy, and connected to spirits and gods, and had some kind of magic power. This stone is basically screaming magic, ritual, spiritual, religious. It's screaming magic person. If you know how to read the signs, of course. So this Thorvi was probably a religious leader of some kind. So now we have the indication that female spiritual leaders were called queens. And that's very interesting. Very interesting. Because if she wasn't a royal queen, what kind of queen was she? And it is, from my point of view, my knowledge, it's very improbable that a royal queen would also have a magical connection to a god, or take on children in her family without names. That's not even on the map, as far as I know. I could of course be wrong, but as far as I know, from all of my research and all of my knowledge, I can't see that being a thing. And as we can see, the mound is, the second stone is standing on a mound still, and that mound is very small. And you can see from the grave mounds that we still can see, not everyone got a grave mound, of course. It takes, first of all, you have to own that land that the mound stands on, and it takes a very long time to make a mound. And for high royalty or big leaders or heroes or big meaningful people that get big mounds, common people didn't really get mounds. And if they did, they were very small, because that is based on how the mound is constructed and how it's built, as we will take a look at in another. I'm preparing another episode on graves from the Iron Age, and we will see how it's done there. But basically, a grave mound for a common person, or maybe the head of the family, got a mound. You can usually see around an Iron Age farm. And when I say Iron Age, the Viking Age is the end of the Iron Age. So if you look at an Iron Age farm, you can see mostly how many heads of the family has had that farm, because there will be a mound after all of them. So if it has one mound, it was one family. If it has 2 or 3 or 4 mounds, it passed on to more heads of the family, who was also buried on that same land. And those are the smallest kind of mounds, that are constructed by basically a ring of stones, and the ashes or bones in some cases of the person is in the middle, covered by a big stone, sometimes in a pot, a clay pot, or just in the ground. And then they raised a pile of dirt over this ring, the stone ring, and the grave. And that makes a very small mound. That's the most common kind of grave mound. If we're talking about some big leader or a king or something, we have a far greater mound, because the whole community helped in building this mound. And those mounds have a little house inside them, a little square house or building, where they placed all of the person's belongings. And the higher it gets, the more belongings, as boats or animals, horses, all of their weapons, and other attire like food and beds, and it can be all kinds of things. But in the smaller mounds, it's basically just a person in the form of ashes or bones and a stone circle and nothing more. And that mound isn't that big. And this is a very small mound, so this was probably not a royal queen. A royal queen would have a far greater mound than that. And as I said, there doesn't seem to be a king anywhere. And that would be very unusual, that you had a ruling queen, a royal queen ruling without a king or all of the people around the royalties. No special land, there's no buildings found close to any of these stones. So where did she live? So I believe that this religious or spiritual leader person, Torvi, got a small mound, and they called her their queen, as in her role as the leader of this little group of lost people. And concerning the name Tuva in Rafnuka Tuva, or Tuvi or Tuve or whatever, as we know in the Younger Fudark, in runic texts with the Younger Fudark, there is no letter O. So the letter O is replaced by the letter U. And the original name form is Tova. And that can be transformed to Tove, Tovi, whatever, doesn't matter. All of these have the same base, Tor, followed by different by names, so Tor and then another name. And that name can be used for both sexes. In the female case, the name Torfrid and Torvi are the most common ones, maybe. And Torfrid means Tor and beautiful or peace. Frid means peaceful, beautiful. And Torvi, as we said, devotee or sacred. And on the male side, Torvald, not very common, but it's a name that turns up sometimes. Vald is a very old word for ruler. So ruler in the name of Thor, or by Thor, by the power of Thor. And Torvid, and that vid means basically the same as the English with. And association with, this name is Thor, associated to Thor in some way. And there are of course other names with the word Thor in it, like Thorstein and Torsten, as we say it in Swedish today. That means of course Thor and stone, but they are not abbreviated in the same way. Because all of these Torfrid, Torvi, Torvald, Torvid couldn't be Torvi, or Tovi, or Tove, or Tova. And generally in Nordic names, the A ending is female and the I or E ending are male. But in unisex names, as these and nicknames, this rule doesn't apply. So you can use it however you want. If it's a nickname, you can just say whatever. Doesn't matter. It means the same thing. The ending doesn't mean anything, really. But all of these, if there's a Torvi female or a Torvid, like a male, they could all be called Tova, Tove, Tovi. That's not important. Mostly they had some other name, some other nickname or by name. So that is the story about the fascinating stones on Denmark, or in Denmark, of Rafnunga, Tuva and Thorvi and their friends Knubli and Fundin. And this is very fascinating, and I have been looking hard to find more information on this, but I can't seem to find much. Maybe if you find anything you can write it in the comments so I can see it and read it. But for some reason these stones aren't very researched or interpreted, and I have a theory on why, but that will stay with me. But this stone, the first stone, is very rare, and as I said, I believe this is from the early 800s or late 700s, where the younger runes has begun to take over from the older runes, but the use of the older runes are still there. There is also another explanation, that there is some kind of meaning written into this stone that I haven't found yet, that could have some kind of magic purpose. But just looking at the holes in the stone tells me that this person was known for being connected to spirits or gods in some way, because it's very rare to see a runestone with that many holes in it, and they only took pieces of stone from stones with magic runes on them, magic message on them, or if the person they were raised after were magic in some way. So this was some kind of a Thor priestess, as I see it. I don't think it was a royal queen at all. I think the queen just means leader. And I think this was a spiritual leader or a religious leader in some way who got the name queen. And the god in question isn't really hard to figure out, depending on the names and the hammers. But that's all I had. If you watched this far, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. So thanks for watching. Bye bye.